Xie Chening's mistress had run away again. His heart burned with anxiety. He summoned his men overnight and set off for Jiangnan in person to fetch her back. When I return this time, I'll give her a proper status, he informed me before leaving. Can you come home sooner, husband? I asked softly. He snatched the document from my hand in irritation. Home, home, are you that incapable of being without me? He scrawled his signature, tossed the paper aside, and strode out, in his desperate haste. He failed to notice that the paper he had just signed was our divorce agreement. It was the 3rd year of our marriage when Xie Chening took a mistress. Her surname was Luo, her given name Lingshuang, just as her name suggested. She stood as proud and unyielding as a frost-covered branch. She refused outright to enter the Marquis's mansion as a concubine. Yet she loved Xie Chening deeply, unable to bear being separated from him. Every now and then, overcome by torment, she would flee the capital. And every time, Xie Chening would go mad with worry, rushing around to search for her. Once he found her, his affection for her would only deepen. This was already the 3rd time she had fled since coming to the capital, and it just so happened to fall on my birthday. Madam, the Marquis has truly left. No sooner had Xie Chening's footsteps faded than Chun Dao burst into the room in a fluster. Won't you go stop him? Didn't the Marquis promise you? Xie Chening had promised to stay with me to celebrate my 18th birthday. I had spent an entire month preparing for it. A memory suddenly flashed through my mind, the first time I met Luo Lingshuang. It was right after Xie Chening returned from accompanying the emperor on his southern inspection tour. Word had spread that a young lady had saved his life. I asked Xie Chening to take me to her residence to express my gratitude. She was sitting on a swing that Xie Chening had built for her with his own hands, her smile as bright and dazzling as the stars on a summer night. Yet the moment Xie Chening turned away, she leaned close to my ear and chuckled softly. So even the unloved have the audacity to be the Marquis's wife. Are you certain you can compete with me? Compete? There was no need for competition at all. I had never been a match for her. I smiled faintly. Folding the divorce agreement on the table and tucking it away. Chun Dao, is my dowry list still kept somewhere? My parents had passed away when I was young. My dowry was not extravagant, but it was by no means meager. Over the years, I had dedicated myself wholeheartedly to the Marquis's mansion, merging my belongings with Xie Chening's until there was no longer a clear distinction between his and mine. I instructed Chun Dao to go through the list and sort out everything that belonged to me. Then send it out of the mansion secretly under the cover of night. I told the steward to take inventory of the several shops bestowed upon me by the Empress and prepare to replace all the staff there. I ordered the servants to erase every trace of me from the mansion, especially the flowers and plants I had tended to so carefully over the years. Finally, I began to pack my own luggage personally. In truth, there was not much to take, just a few pieces of jewelry. This pair of Mandarin duck jade pendants. When the Empress had let me choose my own husband, I had worried that Xie Chening had no affection for me. Yet I could not bring myself to decline the marriage, so I had sent him a sachet. In return, he had given me this pair of jade pendants. I had been so overjoyed that I had not slept a wink that night. This phoenix hairpin, it was a gift from Xie Chening on the day of my return visit to the mansion after the wedding. He had said that even though I had no real home to go back to, from then on, the Marquis's mansion could be my true family. I had been so touched that I had secretly wiped away my tears. This jewel heart pendant, he had brought it to me early on New Year's Day of our first year of marriage, one for each of us to wear. This ring, this hairpin, this green jadeite. He had once treated me so well that I had truly believed he loved me deeply. But that had only lasted for 1 year. Chingy. The Marquis's mansion is so large, must you wait for me in the study? Chingy, I'm busy. Go amuse yourself somewhere else. Will you, Shen Chingy? Are you not the least bit tired of pestering me? The most beautiful things in the world are never meant to last, like colorful clouds that disperse in an instant, like glazed jade that shatters at the slightest touch. Even before Luo Lingshuang had appeared, Xie Chening had already grown tired of me. I left all the jewelry, clothes, and trinkets that Xie Chening had given me in the room. I did not want to leave anything that might irritate the new mistress of the mansion. As for my wedding dress, I burned it to ashes without hesitation. Half a month later, the staff at the shops had been completely replaced, cutting off all ties with the Marquis's mansion. The front courtyard and the back garden had been thoroughly cleaned, every trace of me erased without a trace. I rented a new residence on the day I moved out. Chun Dao cried her heart out. Shall we wait a little longer? How could the Marquis bear to let you leave? I'm no longer the Marquis's wife, I corrected her gently. I cannot take your deed of indenture with me right now, but once he returns, I will come back for you. I wiped the tears from Chuantao's cheeks. Madam, madam. The steward came rushing over, holding a letter in his hand, his face beaming with excitement. Madam, the Marquis sent this letter by fast horse. He insisted that it must be delivered directly into your hands for you to open personally. Chuantao's eyes lit up instantly. He must have realized his mistake and written to apologize. Madam, open it quickly. I stared at the letter. Xie Chening had not written me a single letter in years. Before our marriage, it had been those letters, one after another, that had made me fall in love with him. Madam, hurry, Chun Dao urged impatiently. It's so thick, surely the Marquis is truly remorseful. I squeezed my palms tightly, then finally reached out and took the letter. I unfolded it. I have found Lingshuang. We will return to the capital soon. Lingshuang has grown quite thin. Prepare plenty of sweet osmanthus. She loves the osmanthus cakes you make. Start arranging the courtyard for Lingshuang. She is afraid of the cold and loves the sunlight. Lingshuang does not care for shoe brocade. She prefers silk above all else. Colors like lake blue, willow green, crimson red, and indigo purple suit her best. There is no need for too much jewelry for Lingshuang. She favors simplicity and elegance. Lingshuang, Lingshuang, Lingshuang. The letter went on for more than 10 pages, every line filled with her name. The very last sentence read, Lingshuang has had a hard life. You will be in charge of preparing her dowry. Do take it seriously. 8 years of knowing each other, 3 years of marriage. At that moment, the tiny flame of hope that had flickered in the depths of my heart was extinguished completely, without a trace of smoke left behind. I'm afraid these matters will have to trouble you, I said calmly, handing the letter to the steward. I turned around and never looked back. Xie Chening had a group of old friends in Yangzhou. After finding Luo Lingshuang, he did not hurry to return to the capital. For one thing, Luo Lingshuang loved to play and was reluctant to leave. For another, he had already handed over all the wedding preparations to Shenqingyi. What was the rush to go back? Marquis Xie is truly a man of romance, gallivanting around Jiangnan with his new love while leaving his old wife to handle the wedding arrangements in the capital. Someone at the wine table brought up the topic. Won't your wife be angry? Another man immediately chimed in. Brother Guo, you clearly do not know the whole story. Marquis Xie is a master at managing his wife. Everyone in the capital knows how deeply his wife dotes on him. Not only would she accept him taking a secondary wife, she would probably even volunteer to demote herself to concubine to make room for the new mistress. Am I right, Marquis Xie? Xie Chening raised his eyebrows, a smirk playing on his lips. It was not an exaggeration at all. Shenqingyi was gentle, obedient. Her eyes always fixed solely on him. The day he had told her he intended to take Luo Lingshuang into the mansion, she had not shown the slightest hint of opposition. Instead, she had only urged him to come home sooner, unable to bear being apart from him even for a single day. Just then, his attendant pushed the door open and entered. Xie Chening's lips curved into a smile as he waved the man over. Has my wife sent a reply? It was the first time he had written to her while away from home. And he had entrusted her with such an important matter. She must be over the moon with joy. The attendant bowed deeply, glanced at the men at the table, and hesitated, as if reluctant to speak. It's all right, these are my closest friends. Speak your mind, Xie Chening said. The attendant lowered his head and replied, It's a message from Steward Wang, he says. Madam has left the mansion. Left the mansion. Yes, Madam packed her luggage, took her dowry, and left the mansion. Xie Chening stood up abruptly, his face darkening. Phut, Luo Lingshuang, who had been quiet all along, suddenly let out a laugh. So even my elder sister has learned from me to throw a tantrum. But she is already the Marquis's legal wife. With her dowry in hand, where else can she go? In the next instant, her eyes reddened with tears. Oh, it's all my fault. I've been so willful that I've led elder sister astray. Marquis, let's go back quickly. It would be terrible if elder sister is so angry that she never returns to the mansion. Xie Chening scoffed coldly. Not return to the mansion. Where else would she go? Back to that wolf's den of a Shen family that would chew her up and spit her out without a trace? Changfeng, he called to his attendant, extend our stay at the inn for another month. He would wait and see. She wanted to leave the mansion. Let her go. Just how far could she run, and how long could she keep this up? According to the laws of the current dynasty, women were not allowed to establish their own households. If a woman divorced her husband, she could only take her dowry and return to her natal family. But my parents were long gone. I had been raised by my uncle and aunt since I was 8 years old. My so-called natal family was nothing more than their home. When I married, my uncle and aunt had already embezzled half of the property left to me by my parents. I had no desire to go back there ever again. That was why I did not rush to the government office to submit the divorce agreement. Instead, I entered the palace. The Empress and my mother had been old friends. She had contributed half of my dowry herself. You and Xie Chening, you've divorced. Somehow, I had not cried when Xie Chening had signed the divorce agreement without a second glance. I had not cried when I had left Yongning Marquis's mansion alone with my luggage. But at the Empress's gentle question, tears suddenly streamed down my face, unbidden. Don't cry, it's better this way, far better. The Empress pulled me into her arms. Who in the entire capital does not know about that scoundrel's philandering ways? I rested my head quietly on the Empress's lap, wiping away my tears gently. Now that you are divorced, what do you plan to do next? In truth, I rarely went to the Empress to pour out my troubles, whether it was the harsh treatment I had endured in the Shen family when I was young, or the unhappiness I had felt after marrying Xie Chening. The Empress was burdened with countless affairs in the harem. I could not bear to trouble her further with my own problems. But this time, I told her everything, all my difficulties and hardships. I rose to my knees and knelt before her. So until I find a suitable man to remarry, I will have to trouble your majesty for your help, and if my uncle and aunt try to bully me, you have already made up your mind to remarry? The Empress asked suddenly. I nodded. If I had to go back to the Shen family, I would rather remarry, but this time, I would not give my heart, would not fall in love, would not yearn for a harmonious marriage. I would marry only for a roof over my head, a place to call my own. The Empress seemed to see through my thoughts completely. She suddenly slammed her palm down on her thigh. I happen to have the perfect candidate right here. Meng Yi, courtesy named Cheng Xiao, the only son of the general's mansion, the Empress's own nephew. He had first stepped onto the battlefield at the age of 13 and been conferred the title of general at 18. The only flaw, at 21, he was still unmarried, with no children to his name, but compared to his illustrious family background and brilliant military achievements, this so-called flaw was insignificant, not worth mentioning at all. Sigh. The Empress let out a soft sigh. You don't know about him. She leaned close to my ear. covering her mouth with her hand in embarrassment, and whispered 4 words. I instantly understood, but I had not expected things to happen so quickly. I had only just agreed to the Empress's suggestion to meet him sometime in the future to see if we were a match. The very next day, word came from the border of an urgent military matter. He had raced northward at breakneck speed, riding 3 horses to death without stopping for a moment. 7 days later, before dawn had even broken, there was a loud knock on the door of the residence where I was staying temporarily. I had heard some rumors about him before: the fierce little Yama, the ghost general that men and ghosts alike fear. But the man who stood before me was a refined young scholar. Dressed in white robes that were whiter than snow, he held a paper fan, pointing at the moon that was about to sink below the horizon. I think tonight's moon is so big and round. Oh no, that's not right. He cleared his throat and began again, his tone turning overly formal. I observe that tonight the moon shines bright and the stars are few, the moon like a silver plate, moonlight flowing like water, the moon pale and the breeze gentle, moonbeams dancing, and the sweet scent of osman thus filling the air. I have come specially to have a word with you, young lady. I could barely hold back a laugh. The so-called ghost general was a man of martial prowess, loved tearing books apart, and hated nothing more than spouting literary nonsense. It seemed this marriage was truly a great worry weighing on his mind. Could it be that he was actually afraid I would look down on him? General, there is no need for such formality, I said, inviting him inside. Her Majesty the Empress has already told me about your situation. You may speak plainly with me. I had prepared myself mentally for what he might say, but I had not expected him to be this plain-spoken. Has my aunt told you everything? I nodded. He took a deep breath. These are the deeds to my farmlands and estates. From now on, they shall be managed by you. These are the receipts for all my silver deposits. You may withdraw or deposit money as you wish from now on. And this is a divorce agreement, already signed and sealed by me. Should there be even the slightest unhappiness between us in the future, you may use this document to regain your freedom. Everything under my name shall belong to you. Miss Shin, he said, presenting the thick stack of papers, his voice steady without a single pause. Will you marry Meng Yi as my wife? I agreed to marry Meng Yi. I could think of no reason to refuse, in terms of family background, appearance, and moral character. He was flawless. If it were not for those 4 words the Empress had whispered to me, he would never have condescended to marry a woman who had been married once before. And as for me, I wanted nothing more from him than a roof over my head. In a way, could this be called a match made in heaven? The next day, Meng Yi and I went to the government office together to submit the divorce agreement. The magistrate stared at us, his mouth gaping wide enough to fit an egg. He did not dare to ask a single question, trembling as he handed me my new household registration document. On the 3rd day, the general and his wife paid me a visit. The general's wife was utterly delighted with me. As if overcome with emotion at the thought that her son had finally found a woman he wanted to marry, she took my hands and looked me over again and again, her eyes red with tears. Before they left, she took my birth chart. Less than half a month later, the wedding date for Meng Yi and me was set. Meng Yi seemed genuinely happy. Perhaps to make the marriage seem more real, he not only took charge of every detail personally, but also often asked me out to go sightseeing together. I found him quite amusing. He was clearly a bold and unrestrained military man. Yet every time he was with me, he put on the pretense of being a refined scholar, as if afraid that if I saw his true nature, I would regret agreeing to the marriage. One day, we were at the embroidery workshop looking at wedding dresses. The shopkeeper, for some reason, refused to sell me the exquisite cloud-patterned brocade. I watched as Meng Yi's anger flared, his hand lifting to slam his official waist token onto the table. Then his gaze suddenly fell on me. Ahem. What lovely weather we're having today, sun shining brightly, not a cloud in the sky. a gentle breeze caressing our faces, and the air filled with the warmth of spring. Miss Shen, why don't we go boating on the lake instead? As we walked out of the embroidery workshop, I was still hiding my smile behind my hand. My dear wife, please stop laughing at me, he muttered softly beside me, then gently took my hand in his. My heart skipped a beat. Just then, a commotion erupted on the street. Marquis has returned to the capital. All civilians, step aside at once. The crowd jostled me, forcing me to take 2 steps back. I looked up and saw 2 horses clearing the way ahead. Xie Chening rode behind them, followed by several carriages, and sitting in front of him was a beautiful young woman, Qingyi. When he saw me, a flash of surprise flickered in Xie Chening's eyes. He urged his horse forward, about to ride over to me. Luo Lingshuang suddenly leaned to one side, her voice soft and coquettish. Marquis, Xie Chening reached out to steady her. When he looked back at me again, it was as if he had remembered something, his eyes filled with a hint of arrogance. Come here, he said, his chin tilted slightly upward, looking down at me from his horse. Help your husband's new wife dismount, making a scene in the middle of the street, humiliating me in front of everyone. I could almost laugh out loud. I was about to step forward when I felt someone tugging my hand, trying to shield me behind his back. I squeezed Meng Yi's hand in return, shaking my head at him, in front of such a large crowd. I did not want the general's mansion to be dragged into scandal because of me. My affairs were my own to settle. Meng Yi stared down at our clasped hands for a moment, frozen in place. Shen Qingyi, are you deaf? A crowd of commoners had gathered along the street. Xie Chening apparently had not noticed Meng Yi standing beside me. I took the opportunity to push Meng Yi further back, out of sight. I think it's not me who's deaf, I said, taking a step forward. It's the Marquis who's gone mad. Clearly, you and I are already. Shen Qingyi, how dare you call me mad? Marquis Tilda Luo Lingshuang nestled coquettishly into Xie Chening's arms. Marquis, please don't be angry with elder sister. It's all Lingshuang's fault, making you leave the capital for so long, neglecting elder sister. That's why she's quarreling with you. Marquis, she said, clutching the front of his robe, her head lowering shyly. Let's go home to discuss family matters, shall we? Look at all these people. Xie Chening glanced around at the crowd of onlookers, finally noticing the sea of faces surrounding them. Shen Qingyi, look at this. Even though Lingshuang has never had a day of schooling, she's far more sensible than you. You go home and wait for me obediently. He pointed at me with his horsewhip. Once I've settled Lingshuang in, I'll return to deal with you. With a flick of his whip, he galloped away with Luo Lingshuang in his arms. It was utterly ridiculous. He and I were no longer husband and wife. I had no ties left to his Marquis's mansion. Why on earth would I go back to his mansion to wait for him? I turned and walked straight back to my own house, closing the front gate firmly behind me. I shut the door to my room and closed the windows as well. The peaceful calm I had maintained for the past 2 months was finally shattered. But it was all right. Even when a pet you have raised for years dies, it takes time to find peace again. How much more so for someone you have loved for so long? Given a little more time, I would be all right. Just as I was lost in these thoughts, a small crack appeared in the window. A wooden puppet popped its head through. Bobbing back and forth, it spoke in a high-pitched, mimicking voice. Ahem. What lovely weather we're having today, sun shining brightly, not a cloud in the sky. The gentle breeze caressing our faces, and the air filled with the warmth of spring. Little miss, would you like to go fly a kite on the roof? Meng Yi was quite a character. Even though his refined scholar act was just a pretense, the more I got to know him, the more I realized he was not at all as arrogant and terrifying as the rumors made him out to be. I went back to the general's mansion with him. He proudly showed off his lightness kung fu skills, effortlessly lifting me into his arms and leaping onto the roof. With a light tap of his toes, he actually managed to fly a kite high up into the sky from the roof. The spring breeze was warm and gentle. Watching the kite dancing freely under the clear blue sky, I felt an unexpected sense of contentment. "Miss Shen," Meng Yi suddenly asked, breaking the silence, "why did you ever fall in love with Xie Chening?" He had seen everything in just a few short moments on the street, the way Xie Chening had looked down on me, the way he had scorned me. Why had I loved Xie Chening? Once, when I was living in the Shen mansion, he was the only one who was willing to help me. Having lost my parents at a young age, I had lived under the roof of my uncle and aunt, at their mercy. My uncle and aunt had coveted my inheritance, and my female cousins had treated me like a servant. Only every year, when my cousin brought Xie Chening to stay at the Shen mansion, things would be a little better. He would stand up for me. When he was around, the members of the Shen family would behave themselves a little more, and when he was away, he would write to me asking if I lacked anything, telling me to always let him know if I was being wronged. When you are all alone with no one to turn to, falling in love with the only source of warmth in your life seems only natural. "I see," Meng Yi muttered. He had been lying on the roof with his arms under his head and his legs crossed, but after saying those words, he rolled over, turning his back to me. There was an inexplicable air of dejection about him. Come to think of it, he too had helped me once. It was the first New Year after my parents passed away. I had covered my face with thick powder and gone to pay my respects to the Empress. When the Empress asked me how I was faring in the Shen mansion, I did not dare to say a single word about the hardships I endured. Even then, I knew that my uncle had taken over my father's position as minister and had also become the head of the Shen family. Telling the Empress the truth would only put her in a difficult position. But on my way back, walking along the long palace corridors, memories of the happy times I had spent here with my mother flooded my mind, and I could not hold back my tears. "Who's this ugly monster, covered in so much powder? You look like a ghost." That was when Meng Yi appeared. He had been so fierce that he had made me cry even harder, causing the powder on my face to smudge, revealing the slap marks underneath. "Stop crying, for heaven's sake. Who did this to you? I'll beat them up for you." "All right, you're not ugly. You're more beautiful than any fairy in heaven. I swear I'll never marry anyone else but you." "Okay, oh come on, I'm begging you. I've never apologized to anyone in my life. But I'll apologize to you. Will you forgive me, please?" I had not held it against him. I had accepted the handkerchief he offered to wipe my tears, wanting to thank him for accompanying me through that difficult afternoon. But my cousin had found the handkerchief. She had been in love with Meng Yi and had locked me up and beaten me severely because of it. From that day on, I had avoided him like the plague, and we had never crossed paths again. The general's wife insisted that I stay for dinner before letting me leave. Meng Yi walked me home. He was unusually quiet the entire way, as if he was bottling up his anger inside. Unlike before, he did not walk me to the door. He turned around and left in a hurry the moment we reached my house. I thought I heard him muttering something to himself as he walked away, something about a real man never letting a grievance go unaddressed, never letting a grudge go unavenged, a true gentleman never. I could not think of anyone in the entire capital who would dare to make an enemy of Meng Yi. I was so lost in my thoughts that I did not notice how unusually quiet the courtyard was that night. As I pushed open the door to my room, a cold laugh sounded behind me. "So this is why my wife has been so stubborn, refusing to return home for 2 whole months. It seems you've found yourself a powerful protector." Xie Chening stood there, bathed in moonlight, as if he had been waiting for me for a long time. It had only been 2 months, yet I suddenly found him completely unfamiliar. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me defensively, and turned to face him. "Marquis Xie pays me a late-night visit. What brings you here?" Xie Chening did not answer my question. Instead, he smiled coldly. "Let me guess. Dowry taken away, a new house rented, carriages from the general's mansion." Is my wife planning to curry favor with the Shun family using the general's mansion's influence, so that they'll take you in? What on earth was he talking about? Marquis has just returned to the capital today. You should go to your beloved's side and get a good night's sleep, I said coldly. Perhaps it will help clear your muddled mind. I called out to the steward I had hired. Uncle Lee, show our guest out. Shun Qingyi. Xie Chening strode forward in 3 quick steps, grabbing my wrist tightly. What on earth is wrong with you? You took your dowry, you took your luggage, you even dug up all the flowers and plants you planted in the mansion over the years. There's a limit to how far you can take your little tantrums. You're the respected lady of the Marquis's mansion. Don't you care about making a fool of yourself by carrying on like this? I am not your lady of the Marquis's mansion. A sudden realization struck me like a bolt of lightning. I stared at Xie Chening, my eyes widening in disbelief. Xie Chening, that day when I asked you to sign that document, did you not even bother to read what it said? Xie Chening frowned in confusion. What document? Only at that moment did I finally understand. So that divorce agreement, the document I had hesitated over, fretted over, and handed to him with such solemnity, he had not even bothered to lift his eyes to glance at it. Typical of Xie Chening, he always found a way. Just when I thought I had reached the end of my rope, with nowhere left to turn, to humiliate me further, to trample on the feelings I had once held for him. Qingyi, you're just trying to make me jealous, he said, his tone dripping with disdain. Don't you know that aping others only makes you look ridiculous? That you'll only end up doing the opposite of what you intend? Word has spread all over the capital by now. The general's mansion's Meng Yi is discussing marriage. Xie Chening's mouth kept moving, spitting out one cutting remark after another. You think you can use your relationship with the Empress to get Meng Yi to marry into the Shun family, to curry favor with them so that they'll take you back in? Don't dream of it. Who do you think Meng Yi is? Back in the day, he could have had his pick of every noble lady in the capital, and he turned them all down. You know exactly what sort of looks and morals your female cousins have. Don't be so delusional. Slap. I raised my hand and struck him across the face, silencing his endless prattling. Shun Qingyi, if I do want Meng Yi to marry into the Shun family, so what? Xie Chening was so angry that his hand trembled as he pointed at me. Fine, fine. If you're so capable, then stay in the Shun mansion for the rest of your life. Never set foot in my Yongning Marquis's mansion again. As if I would ever go back to the Yongning Marquis's mansion. Originally, I had not even planned to go back to the Shun mansion at all. I had already discussed it with the Empress this time. My remarriage would be a simple affair, with no betrothal gifts needed. But Meng Yi had suddenly changed his mind. He said that as the only son of the general's mansion, this would be the only wedding the family would hold in decades. It deserved to be held with great fanfare and splendor, a celebration for everyone to see. I had no way to argue, so I nodded my agreement. What a coincidence that on the very night Xie Chening had come to find me, something unexpected had happened at the Shun mansion. First, the storehouse had caught fire. Though they had put it out in time, the losses had been severe. Then, strange things had started happening. My uncle's beard, my aunt's hair bun, even the long hair of my cousin who had married and moved away years ago, had all vanished overnight. The entire back courtyard had been thrown into chaos, filled with screams and wails. The next day, a large group of people had arrived at my rented residence in a grand procession. They claimed that a highly respected monk had advised them only by begging me to return home could they suppress the evil spirits haunting the mansion. Since the wedding was going to be a grand affair, it would not do for me to marry from this temporary rented house, so I had taken the opportunity to return to the Shun mansion, and so, in less than half a month, the entire capital knew that the general's mansion was going to form a marriage alliance with the Shun family. The betrothal gifts had been delivered continuously for an entire day and night, filling the already spacious courtyard of the Shun mansion to the brim. on the very same day, wedding news had also spread from the Yongning Marquis's mansion. The mistress that Marquis Xie had kept for 2 years was actually going to be carried into the mansion in a grand sedan chair. To become his legal wife, the betrothal gifts he had given her were even said to be no less lavish than those from the general's mansion. For a time, the capital was abuzz with talk of the 2 weddings. I had no interest in joining in the fuss. Living in the Shun mansion was not at all like living in my own little rented house. Coming and going was not nearly as free, so I simply stayed in my room, reading books to pass the time. Mengyi, however, always found ways to make me laugh. He had taken over my small kitchen. My mother had been from Huainan, and to my surprise, he was actually quite skilled at cooking Huainan cuisine. The presentation of his dishes was so bizarre it made me laugh out loud, but the taste was absolutely perfect, leaving no room for complaint. One day, as I was eating one of his dishes, tears suddenly streamed down my face. It had been so many years since my mother had passed away, so many years since I had tasted this familiar flavor. Is it that bad? He asked in a panic. It's terrible. I'll never cook it again. Never. I'll throw it away right now. Please stop crying, my dear lady. That flustered, anxious look on his face reminded me of the awkward young boy he had been all those years ago, and I found myself smiling through my tears. The days passed quickly, until finally, the wedding was only 10 days away. After we were married, I planned to accompany Mengyi to southern Xinjiang. So I went out to buy some supplies for the long journey south. They say that enemies are destined to meet, but I rather thought Luo Lingshuang had waited for me on purpose. When I went to the jewelry store, she bought every single piece of jewelry I had even glanced at. When I went to the cosmetics shop, she had the shopkeeper wrap up everything I had shown the slightest interest in. Even when I went to the herbal medicine shop, she followed me there, swaying her hips gracefully as she walked. Oh my! The medicine's elder sister is buying our all for dispelling evil spirits and reducing internal heat, she said in a sweet, cloying voice. Just how pent up and frustrated must you be? She was truly living up to her new status as the future legal wife, dressed head to toe in gaudy, flashy clothes, completely unlike the plain, frost-like woman she had once pretended to be. I had originally planned to buy some things that elder sister likes, so that when you come back to the mansion in the future, we can use them together, she said, feigning kindness. But these cold-natured medicines, forgive me, sister, but I really can't bring myself to agree with your choice. She twisted her waist and called out to the shopkeeper, Shopkeeper, bring me several packs of medicine for stabilizing pregnancies. Ah, so she was pregnant. No wonder she was being so ostentatious, casting aside her previous pretense of being aloof and pure. 2 months along, she whispered in my ear, her voice dripping with malice. I conceived this child exactly when the Marquis left you behind to chase after me in Jiangnan. I stepped around her, trying to ignore her, but she followed me closely, relentlessly. Elder sister, why do you insist on making things so difficult for yourself? She taunted. Abandoning your husband's family's wedding to meddle in your natal family's marriage affairs. Have you had your wedding dress made yet? The Marquis booked all the cloud-patterned brocade in the entire capital 2 months ago, to ensure that I would be the most dazzling bride in the whole city, so that was why the shopkeeper had refused to sell me any cloud-patterned brocade. I held up the medicines in my hand and said to the shopkeeper, that's all I need. Please wrap them up for me. Luo Lingshuang clung to me like a leech, refusing to let me go. Oh, by the way, I'm sure you know the date of my wedding with the Marquis, don't you? She said with a smirk. The 8th day of the lunar month, on the exact same day as your wedding at the Shen mansion. Tell me, on that day, will you stay cooped up in the Shen mansion, or will you shamelessly crawl back to the Marquis's mansion? Luo Lingshuang laughed triumphantly, her eyes glinting with malice. I took the wrapped medicine packet from the shopkeeper and said coldly, move out of my way. She did not budge. I tried to step around her again. Suddenly, she let out a loud cry of "oh no," and stumbled backward, pretending to fall. Shun Qingyi, she truly wasted her talent for scheming and manipulation on men. Xie Chening rushed over to catch her in his arms, frowning as he glared at me. I stared back at him coldly, unflinching. I refused to believe he had not seen what had really happened. He had been standing right at the door of the herbal medicine shop the entire time Luo Lingshuang had been taunting me about our wedding dates. Not only had I not pushed her, I had not even touched the hem of her clothes. In the end, Xie Chening looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I picked up my medicine packet and stepped over the threshold, leaving the shop. Shun Qingyi, as I brushed past him, he ground his teeth and hissed at me. On the 8th day, if you don't come back to preside over the wedding, you can forget about ever being the mistress of this Marquis's mansion again. I felt nothing but amusement toward Xie Chening, not even anger. Ordinary commoners might not know which young lady from the Shun family the general's mansion was marrying, but most officials in the court had received wedding invitations from the general's mansion, even though Meng Yi had not sent an invitation to the Yongning Marquis's mansion. A single inquiry would have been enough for Xie Chening to find out the truth. The bride on the 8th day was me, and he still thought I would go back to preside over his wedding to Luo Lingshuang. I paid no further attention to the matter, continuing to prepare for our journey to southern Xinjiang as planned, but every time I went out, I inevitably ran into Xie Chening. He did not come to pick a fight with me. Sometimes, we would lock eyes from a distance, and he would look away coldly. Sometimes, we would pass each other on the street, and he would walk by with a blank expression, not sparing me a single glance. I ignored him in return, but it reminded me of that first year when he had started growing cold toward me. He had complained that I was too clingy. He had chased me out of his study, then out of the front hall, then all the way to the back courtyard. Every time he found me annoying, he would give me the cold shoulder, refusing to speak to me. Back then, I had thought he was angry with me, so I would go to him to apologize and try to make him happy again. Tell me what I did wrong, husband, and I'll change, I would say. He would sigh and gently stroke my hair, his voice soft and deceptive. You did nothing wrong, Qingyi. It's just that I've been swamped with official duties and have neglected you. All you need to do is be a little more obedient, just listen to me, and everything will be fine. His affection had been so fickle, so ambiguous. One moment he would push me away, the next he would pull me close with a sweet gesture, like training a dog with a slap and a treat. Before long, I had finished preparing all my luggage for the journey. The wedding day drew closer and closer. According to custom, the bride and groom were not allowed to see each other before the wedding, so Meng Yi did not come to the Shun mansion for several days. Until the night before the wedding, there was a soft tapping sound at my window, and a small crack appeared as it was pried open. This time, instead of a wooden puppet, a human head popped through the gap. I froze for a moment, then burst out laughing. Why don't you come in through the front door? Must you climb through the window like a thief? I walked over to open the window for Meng Yi, but he stopped me. I rarely saw such bright, shining eyes as his. He looked at me and asked, his voice filled with disbelief and hope, I'm really going to marry you tomorrow? I nodded and smiled. Yes, he asked again, as if afraid he would wake up from a dream. And you're really going to marry me? I nodded again. Yes, I see. He stammered, suddenly flustered. With a loud thud, he closed the window and ran away. I shook my head, still smiling, and turned to get ready for bed. I had just taken out my hairpin and started to undo my bun when there was another soft tapping sound at the window. Why are you back again? I asked, amused. I pried open a small crack and caught a glimpse of a white robe sleeve. My hand froze mid-movement. It was Xie Chening. He did not speak. I did not say a word either. We fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the soft patter of spring rain against the window panes. He was finally going to marry the woman he loved. On the night before his wedding, he should have been thinking only of his bride. What was he doing here, at my window, in that moment? I suddenly realized, perhaps Xie Chening had never truly loved Luo Lingshuang, and perhaps he had never truly hated me either. He had only ever loved what he could not have. Qingyi, he whispered, his voice hoarse and broken, I admit defeat. Okay, let's stop fighting like this. Ever since you left, I haven't been able to sleep a single peaceful night. I was wrong. His shadow fell across the bed, hunched over as if burdened by a great weight. I shouldn't have left you alone on your birthday. I promised you that I would be by your side for every birthday. I shouldn't have neglected you again and again for Luo Lingshuang. Come back with me, come back, and we'll cancel tomorrow's wedding. I won't marry her. I could not help but laugh a cold, bitter laugh. Marry her one moment, call off the wedding the next, as if marriage was nothing more than a childish game to him. We can go back to the original plan. She'll only be my concubine. Okay, he pleaded. Desperation creeping into his voice. You will always be my only wife. I reached out and closed the small crack in the window. I slid the bolt into place, locking him out, for good. Shen Qingyi, Xie Chening's voice was thick with rage. I've humbled myself to this extent. What more could you possibly want from me? I blew out the candle in my room, plunging it into darkness. There was a moment of silence outside. After a long while, a heavy object crashed against the window. We'll see how long you can keep this up. I slept soundly through the night, undisturbed. The next day, before dawn broke, the matchmaker entered my room to help me dress and apply my wedding makeup. TSK, who would do such a thing? A maid swept up a smashed package of peach blossom pastries from outside the window. During the first year of my marriage to Xie Chening, he had often brought me a pack of these pastries when he returned home from his official duties. I would throw myself into his arms happily and say, "You're the best husband in the world." The maid tossed the ruined pastries into the trash. I did not spare them a single glance. The matchmaker's hands moved with practiced skill, applying my makeup, styling my hair, helping me into my wedding dress, and placing the red veil over my head. My aunt led me to pay homage to the ancestors. My uncle escorted me out of the house. When Mengyi took my hand, his palm was slightly damp with nervous sweat. I stared at the red wedding shoes beneath my veil, taking step after careful step toward the bridal sedan chair. The Shen family's bride is off to get married. The auspicious hour had arrived exactly on schedule, and the sound of wedding music filled the air, loud and joyous. Groom, let go of her hand quickly. Don't delay the auspicious hour, the matchmaker teased from outside the sedan chair. Mengyi slipped a piece of candy into my hand. He was afraid I would get hungry. I popped it into my mouth, savoring the sweet taste that melted on my tongue. Before long, the sedan chair was lifted up, swaying gently as it began to move forward. I thought to myself that this marriage was turning out to be quite a triumph after all. My uncle and aunt seemed to be deathly afraid of Mengyi. Not only had they given me all the betrothal gifts as part of my dowry, but they had also returned the half of my parents' inheritance that they had embezzled from me years ago. I planned to visit my parents' graves tomorrow. I would tell them that I had not let them down, that I had finally made it through all the hardships. I thought that going to southern Xinjiang would open up a whole new world for me, a world that was vast, wide, and free, up ahead. The wedding procession from the Marquis's mansion crossed paths with ours from the general's mansion. I still thought to myself that this was not such a bad thing. Today, you marry another woman, and I remarry another man. We would each go our separate ways, and each find our own peace. But some people are simply fated to be tangled in endless karmic ties. As the sound of horse hooves passed by, a sudden gust of wind swept through. Lifting the curtain of my sedan chair and fluttering my red veil aside, I looked up instinctively. Our eyes met. The air seemed to stand still. I calmly pulled the sedan chair curtain closed and adjusted my veil back into place. Behind me, chaos erupted. Marquis, Marquis, what's wrong with you? Let's go. An invitation. What invitation? Didn't you order that nothing related to the Shun mansion should ever cross the threshold of our house? Marquis, Marquis, watch out. The Marquis has fallen off his horse. I had originally wanted the wedding to be simple and quiet precisely because I did not want to stir up any unnecessary trouble, to avoid dragging the general's mansion into scandal because of me. But in the end, my wishes had been in vain. Miraculously, Xie Chening had not been injured at all when he fell off his horse. By the time he arrived at the general's mansion, Meng Yi and I had just finished our wedding ceremony. Meng Chengxiao. How dare you abuse your power, flout the law, and steal my wife? I will impeach you for this. No one dares to stand in my way. Let me in. The hall was filled with wedding guests, all staring in shock. I took a step forward instinctively, but Meng Yi stopped me, his voice calm and steady. Let him in. I could not see Xie Chening's face, but through the gap in my veil, I could see that his bright red wedding robe was torn and tattered, its hem and his shoes covered in dirt and mud. Chingy. Don't be afraid, he said, rushing toward me, his voice trembling with urgency. So that's why you've refused to come back to the mansion all this time. Meng Yi is forcing you to marry him, isn't he? You love me so much, how could you possibly marry someone else? He's using the Empress's power to bully you into this. Shut up, I snapped, cutting him off sharply. Xie Chening froze, stunned into silence. Meng Yi squeezed my hand gently, then reached up to lift my red veil away from my face. His voice soft and reassuring. My dear wife, go on, I'm here, you have nothing to fear. I looked into his bright, warm eyes and smiled, nodding my head. Then I turned my gaze to Xie Chening. I could see the flicker of utter despair in his eyes as he stared back at me. How could this be? Chingy, we were supposed to be. I looked at him coldly, my gaze unwavering. His eyes slowly reddened with tears, and finally, he remembered the words I had spoken to him that night at my rented house. The document, could it be? The divorce agreement has already been submitted to the government office. I said flatly. Marquis Xie is more than welcome to go to the Jingzhou prefecture to verify it for himself. He stumbled backward, almost losing his balance. Chingy, I didn't mean it, I thought. He took 2 steps forward again, reaching out to grab my hand, but I dodged his grasp. Stepping to the side, no matter what you thought, Marquis Xie, you and I have long since had nothing to do with each other. As of today, I am Meng Yi's legally registered wife, and you are supposed to marry your new wife today as well. Please return to your mansion quickly, don't keep your bride waiting for too long. I let out a soft, cold laugh, throwing his own words back at him. You are the esteemed Marquis of Yongning, after all. Don't you care about making a fool of yourself by carrying on like this? He stumbled backward again, finally noticing the dozens of wedding guests staring at him in disbelief. Everyone's eyes were on him, on his dirty, torn wedding robe, his messy hair, and his missing hair crown. How could this be? He staggered backward, dazed and disoriented. Wait a minute. Meng Yi finally stepped forward, pulling me behind him to shield me. You insulted my aunt, harassed my new wife, and disrupted my wedding. I fucking had enough of you. With a roar, he swung his fist and charged at Xie Chening. Needless to say, both the general's mansion and the Yongning Marquis's mansion became the talk of the town after that day. Fortunately, most of the gossip was mocking Xie Chening for being so clueless that he had gotten divorced without even realizing it. The entire capital knew that General Meng did not care that Shen Qingyi was a remarried woman, that the bride he was marrying was none other than the former lady of the Yongning Marquis's mansion. But Xie Chening had chosen to make a scene at the wedding on the very same day he was supposed to marry his own bride. He had been beaten so badly that he could not even get out of bed for days afterward. It served him right. Sigh. I let out a soft sigh and asked Chundao, "Has the young general woken up yet?" After the ugly confrontation with Xie Chening, I had taken advantage of the chaos at the Marquis's mansion while he was bedridden to send someone to trick them into selling me Chuantao's indenture contract, finally freeing her from their grasp. Chundao nodded vigorously. "He's been calling for you, madam." I picked up the bowl of medicinal soup and walked into his room. As soon as I pushed the door open, his cries of pain stopped abruptly. "My dear wife, don't worry about me. I'll be back on my feet in no time." I sat down beside his bed and carefully spoon-fed him the medicinal soup, then popped a candied fruit into his mouth to take away the bitter taste. "Don't worry about you." I raised an eyebrow. He nodded eagerly, his eyes wide and innocent. I picked up the empty bowl and stood up to leave. "Ouch, it hurts like hell. My dear wife, I think my leg is going to be crippled for life." I pushed the door open again. His dramatic wails stopped immediately. I set the bowl down and walked over to the bed. "Let me see where you're hurt," I said, reaching down to pull up his pants. My dear wife. Meng Yi's face turned bright red as he scrambled to the back of the bed, trying to hide from me. I let out a soft sigh and sat down beside him. He was perfectly fine, of course. I had seen everything clearly that day. When he had punched Xie Chening, his moves had been fast and precise, landing blow after blow on Xie Chening's vulnerable spots. Xie Chening was a scholar who had spent his whole life buried in books. He could barely even scratch Meng Yi's skin. Meng Yi had been perfectly fine when they were summoned to the palace afterward, but as soon as he returned home, he had started complaining about a terrible leg pain that was going to cripple him. "My dear wife," he said, rolling back over to me and tugging at my sleeve, his voice soft and pleading, "will you ever leave me?" His acting skills were nowhere near as good as Luo Lingshuang's. I shook my head. "No." "Then I have a question to ask you," he said, looking up at me with a pitiful expression, completely different from the fierce, intimidating man who had beaten Xie Chening to a pulp. "After you divorced Xie Chening, you went to the palace to see my aunt. What did she say to you when she talked about me?" So that was what this was all about. I let out a huge sigh of relief and stood up to leave. "My dear wife," he called after me, panic in his voice. I walked back to my room and began packing my luggage for our journey to southern Xinjiang. That day, when the Empress had mentioned Meng Yi to me, she had sighed and leaned close to my ear, whispering 4 words, "He prefers men." That was why I had truly believed that he was the perfect match for me. No fights over concubines, no pressure to bear children, no need for love or affection. We would simply be husband and wife in name only. I would just need to be his legal wife to satisfy his family's expectations. Perhaps when he grew older, we could adopt a child together to put his parents' minds at ease. "My dear wife, I swear I didn't know about this." Meng Yi suddenly burst into my room. His leg miraculously healed as he ran over to me, circling around me anxiously. "My aunt didn't tell me a single word about this before the wedding. I didn't mean to lie to you." I continued packing my things as he followed me around the room, his leg no longer hurting at all. "My dear wife, you promised you wouldn't leave me." "My dear wife, I don't like men. I don't like women either. I don't like anyone. He grabbed my sleeve, his eyes glistening with tears. "I only like you." I paused, my hands stilling on the clothes in my suitcase. I turned to look at him. "I know," I said softly. I was not a 3-year-old child who would believe everything others said. I had eyes of my own. There are 3 things a person cannot hide: a yawn, a sneeze, and the look in their eyes when they are in love. Being stared at by those warm, passionate eyes every single day, it was impossible not to notice his feelings. Meng Yi's shoulders slumped in dejection, the light fading from his eyes as he let go of my sleeve, taking a few steps back, looking utterly lost. "What I mean is," he began, his voice trailing off, I reached out and took his sleeve, stopping him from pulling away. "Do you mind?" I asked. I might not be able to love you as much as you love me right now," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not even sure if I'll ever be able to love you that way in the future." I did not know if I would ever be able to love someone so wholeheartedly and unreservedly again after everything I had been through, but I knew this: a sincere, pure heart deserved to be cherished, not trampled on. "But I want to try," I said, looking into his eyes. "Will you give me that chance?" The dejected look in Mengyi's eyes instantly turned bright red with tears. He took a step forward and pulled me into a tight, desperate hug. My nose felt a little sore as I patted his back gently. "Then why don't you hurry up and help me pack? We need to leave for southern Xinjiang soon." He had wasted so much time pretending to be injured. It was time for us to start our new life together. On the day we set off, many people came to see us off. The Empress was the most reluctant to let us go. She pulled Mengyi aside and talked to him